Hey horror fan! I create dark, spine-chilling horror stories, and you can help keep the horror alive. Imagine it's like buying me a hauntingly delicious cup of coffee to fuel the next gruesome tale. If you'd like to support, you can donate. My PayPal link is in the description. And with YouTube's guidelines, creating R-rated content is tricky, so if you're up for more unfiltered scares, come join me on Patreon. Thanks for helping me keep the nightmares coming.
Jenny Brooks, an innocent and introverted girl from a small town, receives an unexpected scholarship to the prestigious Dorian Academy for Girls, known for its enigmatic, old-world charm and disciplined reputation. Excited yet slightly apprehensive, Jenny steps onto the Gothic campus only to sense a lurking darkness beneath its ivy-covered walls and somber corridors. Her roommate, Lila, a striking young woman with a sly smile and piercing gaze, seems friendly at first, but soon introduces Jenny to strange traditions of the academy, hinting at a hidden world that no student dares to discuss openly. As Jenny adjusts, she meets the academy's headmistress, Madam Blackwood, a captivating yet ominous woman whose authoritative presence casts a shadow over every gathering. Madam Blackwood takes a particular interest in Jenny, regarding her as though she's being sized up for something more than academic success. Jenny soon realizes that the academy operates under strict, secretive rituals meant to teach the girls to embrace higher knowledge, which Madam Blackwood claims as sacred wisdom. Jenny's nights begin to unravel into nightmarish visions filled with unholy rites, scenes of crimson-lit classrooms where hooded figures conduct strange ceremonies, and whispers that promise power in exchange for submission to the master lurking in the shadows. Each dream blurs with reality, leaving Jenny questioning her own sanity. Lila becomes her guide, luring Jenny further into the academy's underground realm where strange and torturous rituals take place. She witnesses horrifying practices intended to teach the virtues of pain and devotion. The line between initiation and torment vanishes as Jenny finds herself coerced into rituals that worship Satan himself. As the headmistress and senior students push Jenny through escalating trials, she is forced to face her deepest fears, discovering a dark part of herself that responds to the thrill of the academy. A climactic showdown ensues when Jenny learns that she's meant to play a critical role in a grand ritual, a dark, erotic summoning meant to bring forth a powerful entity. Now bound by blood and seduction, she must confront Madam Blackwood, who reveals that the Academy's mission is to groom vessels for dark forces, and that Jenny has been chosen as the ultimate offering. In a final twist, Jenny turns the tables, using the forbidden knowledge she's gathered to outwit the Academy's leaders and escape. But as she runs through the darkened halls in eerie silence, she realizes that Dorian Academy has left a mark on her soul, one that can never be erased. This framework includes an engaging balance of suspense and horror, capturing the intense psychological and supernatural aspects of the plot while leaving certain details to the reader's imagination. Let me know if you'd like to add or adjust elements to further intensify the story's impact. As the days pass, Jenny's dreams grow more vivid, and she finds herself irresistibly drawn to the Academy's forbidden rituals. Madam Blackwood, with her dark allure and hypnotic presence, continues to pull Jenny deeper into the school's secret teachings. Whispered phrases about Satan's knowledge and power echo in her mind even after she wakes, and her once innocent curiosity becomes tinged with a strange, dark desire. One night, Lila brings Jenny to a hidden chamber beneath the academy. Candlelight flickers against stone walls carved with symbols Jenny doesn't recognize. In the center of the room lies an ancient book, bound in worn leather and marked with a blood-red pentagram. This, Lila murmurs, contains secrets most would not dare to learn. But here, we're taught to embrace our fears, our pain, our darkest desires. Lila's eyes flash with a thrill that both frightens and excites Jenny. Madam Blackwood arrives, watching Jenny with a twisted pride. She invites her to read aloud that feels like needles against her tongue. At first, Jenny hesitates, but something compels her forward. The words seem to unleash a power within her, a surge of ecstasy mixed with terror. Around her, shadowy figures close in, chanting and preparing her for a new lesson in pain and submission. Bound and unable to escape, Jenny experiences an ordeal that blends pleasure with agony, each moment blurring her sense of reality further. The academy is no longer a place of learning, it's a theater of torment, meant to break and rebuild her in ways she doesn't understand. The headmistress begins to unveil her grand plan. Jenny, along with a select few other girls, is to undergo the ultimate initiation, a ceremony to seal their devotion to Satan himself. A binding ritual that will tie their souls to the academy forever. Lila, her only friend, reveals her true nature as the headmistress's loyal disciple, her friendship with Jenny a mere tool to lure her further down this path. Jenny is heartbroken, but she's also become deeply entangled in the dark power of the academy, unable to fully reject its pull. On the eve of the ritual, Jenny learns of another way out, a whispered secret from a former student who vanished mysteriously. This student, now a disembodied voice haunting the academy's halls, tells Jenny about a forbidden spell hidden deep within Madam Blackwood's chambers. This spell, if spoken with conviction, has the power to bind the headmistress to her own dark curse, breaking her hold on the academy and freeing Jenny. But there's a risk. The spell could backfire, damning Jenny's soul instead. Torn between escaping or surrendering to the dark force growing within her, Jenny makes a choice. In the dead of night, she sneaks into Madam Blackwood's chambers. The room reeks of incense and decay, with walls covered in arcane symbols and the dark remnants of past rituals. She finds the spell, etched in a locked cabinet, and prepares to confront the headmistress. As the ritual begins, Jenny feels the weight of the academy's gaze upon her. Madam Blackwood leads the chant, urging Jenny to submit fully. But in the middle of the incantation, Jenny interrupts, reciting the forbidden spell aloud. A fierce wind tears through the room, candles flickering violently, as Madam Blackwood's eyes widen in shock and fury. The headmistress's hold over the academy begins to unravel, her own powers turning against her. In a final twist, Jenny realizes that by speaking the spell, she's become the academy's new vessel. The dark force fills her, whispering promises of power beyond imagination. She looks down at her hands, now marked with the same symbols that once bound Madam Blackwood. She has won her freedom, but at the cost of becoming the academy's new dark mistress, forever tied to its legacy of horror and forbidden knowledge. As she gazes over the crowd of fearful students, she feels a twisted satisfaction. They will learn, as she did, what true power feels like. And beneath the academy's ancient stones, the echoes of tortured souls cheer her rise. With her newfound power as the academy's vessel, Jenny feels a dark surge coursing through her veins. The academy's twisted energies have bound themselves to her, whispering promises of unearthly pleasures and endless knowledge. Yet, she quickly realizes that wielding such power comes with consequences. Shadows cling to her, and the torment of former students and victims haunt her every move. Whispers trail behind her as she walks the stone corridors, and flashes of their pain invade her mind, a constant reminder of the legacy she's inherited. Lila, now fearful of the new power Jenny possesses, begins to distance herself, though the bond forged between them by dark rituals and shared suffering remains. Jenny is both drawn to her and repelled, as though Lila symbolizes everything she once was but limits of her new strength. Jenny uses her dark abilities to torment and manipulate her former tormentors, subjecting the once powerful headmistress to the very rituals she forced upon Jenny. Yet, despite the thrill of control, Jenny feels a growing, insatiable void within her. Night after night, she's visited by visions, of a shadowed figure promising ultimate dominion, of torturous ecstasies beyond the human realm, of submission that would make her one with the dark forces themselves. Desperate to understand the extent of her powers, she seeks out the academy's oldest and most forbidden texts, hidden deep within its underground catacombs. These texts tell of an ancient pact. A ritual where one can achieve true, eternal power by giving herself entirely to Satan in an ultimate act of surrender and devotion. Drawn deeper into the academy's clutches, Jenny initiates the pact, determined to unlock its secrets. But this ritual demands a sacrifice, one of her own making. She realizes that to complete the transformation, she must offer someone she holds dear. A twisted part of her considers Lila, the one who led her down this path, as the perfect candidate. Lila, sensing the danger, tries to escape, but Jenny's control over the academy allows her to seal Lila within its shadowed walls. the final ritual takes place on a stormy night, deep within the Academy's hidden chapel. Surrounded by ancient relics and symbols, Jenny stands before an altar, Lila bound and pleading, a mixture of terror and betrayal in her eyes. As Jenny begins the incantation, the air fills with an oppressive energy, dark and pulsing, until it feels as though reality itself is bending, but as Jenny raises the ritual dagger, something strange happens. Shadows begin to twist and distort, and the former headmistress, Madam Blackwood, appears, her spirit emerging from the darkness. Laughing coldly, she reveals that Jenny's fate was sealed from the moment she entered to become its master, but rather its eternal prisoner, another soul to feed the Academy's insatiable hunger. Realizing the deception, Jenny tries to stop the ritual, but the spell has taken hold. The Academy's walls begin to close in on her, and the tormented spirits of past students rise, their spectral forms twisted with anguish. Lila manages to break free and escape, leaving Jenny behind, trapped within the Academy as its newest sacrifice. In a final act of defiance, Jenny attempts to channel her powers one last time, but the Academy swallows her whole, leaving nothing but echoes of her screams within its haunted halls. The Academy remains, ever waiting for its next unwitting victim. Its legacy of horror and blood continuing unbroken. As Jenny's final screams dissolve into the walls, the Academy falls silent, but its dark influence begins to ripple outward, creating a shift within its halls. Lila, having managed a narrow escape, is now haunted by the Academy's reach. Its whispers linger, echoing Jenny's tortured voice, drawing her back in twisted, waking dreams. The same doors she'd once left slam shut in her visions, locking her in the Academy's grip, just as they had done to Jenny. And each night, those doors seem to inch closer in her waking hours, blurring the line between reality and nightmare. Determined to break free from this haunting, Lila returns to the Academy in search of answers. But this time, it's empty. Shadows shift in eerie patterns, and in the dim torchlight, she sees the specter of Madam Blackwood's twisted smile, a cruel, taunting invitation. Realizing she's fallen into the Academy's trap once more, Lila attempts to retrace her steps, backtracking through winding, labyrinthine corridors that twist and change, leading her to places she swears she's never seen before. The Academy's ancient tome, bound with its ritual texts, lies open in the middle of an altar room, as if calling her name. A part of her, drawn by an unknown force, approaches, flipping through its worn pages. There, she finds a final, chilling revelation: the Academy itself is alive, a sinister entity feeding off those who dare to attempt mastery over it. Lila learns that by embracing darkness, one can become a part of the Academy's consciousness, feeding off the souls of others, forever ensnared but powerful within its walls. But to do so, she realizes, would mean surrendering her humanity. Suddenly, she's confronted by Jenny's spectral form, a haunting vision of the friend she once knew. Now twisted, Jenny appears both beautiful and terrifying, her face a mask of agony mixed with dark allure. Her eyes reflecting something cold and inhuman. Jenny speaks in a voice that reverberates through the very stones, confessing that she'd initially fought to escape, but the Academy's pull eventually consumed her, binding her will, and forcing her to become part of its sinister web. "Join me, Lila," Jenny whispers, her words like poison in silk. "We could rule together, tethered to something stronger than life or death. Give in, and the pain will be nothing compared to the power." Desperate, Lila resists the seductive pull of Jenny's offer, but the Academy's walls close in, binding her limbs with shadowy tendrils that tighten with each step she attempts to take away. The room darkens, and spectral forms of other former students emerge, their faces frozen in silent screams, bound to the Academy, their lives sacrificed to its insatiable thirst for souls. Realizing she has one chance to break free, Lila recalls the ancient words written in the Academy's texts, meant to repel the darkness with an equal force of resistance. She speaks them aloud, her voice shaking but steady. The shadows hiss, recoiling as her words echo off the cold stone walls. Jenny's spectral form torn between wanting to reclaim her humanity and being unable to break free from the dark power she's succumbed to. In a final twist, as the Academy begins to collapse upon itself, Lila's chant reaches a fever pitch, breaking the curse holding her within. The academy releases her, its walls reverberating with the last screams of Madam Blackwood and Jenny, as they're absorbed into the heart of the darkness, their faces twisted into tortured masks, a warning to anyone who dares venture back within. Stumbling out of the academy, Lila realizes she's left behind more than just friends, she's abandoned a part of herself in that dark place. And while she's escaped its grasp, she can still feel its shadow lurking. A haunting reminder of the horrors within. She knows, deep down, that the Academy's dark influence will call others, luring them with promises of forbidden knowledge, only to ensnare them as it had nearly ensnared her. As she walks away, the Academy fades into the night, its stones dissolving into shadow, leaving no trace of its existence. Except in the tortured memories of those who narrowly survived, the storm outside rages, but within the cursed walls of the Diablo School for girls, there is an eerie calm. The air thick with the stench of ancient incense, Lila stands at the precipice of her descent into darkness. The Academy, its structure alive with malicious energy, has bent her mind to its will. And her thoughts are now clouded with the teachings of the long-dead Satanists that once ran this place. Her heart races, pounding with an insidious rhythm as she stares into the blood-soaked mirror before her. Her reflection is distorted, a twisted version of herself, her once innocent face now etched with lines of dark desire, her eyes glowing with a malevolent fire. It's as if the mirror itself is drawing out her deepest, most primal urges. The whispered words of Satan's doctrines flood her mind, each phrase like a needle in her brother toward a line she knows she should not cross. You must embrace what is dark to become whole. The voice of Madam Blackwood hisses in the shadows, as if the woman's very essence still clings to the Academy's halls. Lila feels the coldness of her presence, and for a moment, she hesitates. Could she truly surrender herself to this world of eternal darkness? But then she hears it, the sound of whispers. Soft, lilting voices that speak of power, of eternal pleasure, of releasing the full potential of one's soul. A new vision fills her mind, Jenny, her once friend, now fully taken by the Academy's dark embrace. Jenny stands in the center of an underground chamber, adorned with symbols of Satan's rituals. Her body is both beautiful and terrifying, covered in intricate tattoos that glow with an eerie light. Her eyes, however, are empty of the humanity she once had. You must join me, Lila, Jenny calls, her voice sweet and inviting, but the coldness beneath it is undeniable. Together, we can rule this place, become more than human. Just take my hand, and you'll be free of your fears. The temptation is unbearable. Lila's body trembles with the thought of giving in, of becoming like Jenny. But then she remembers the screams, the endless cries of those who had succumbed to the Academy's wicked grasp. The realization strikes her like a bolt of lightning: if she joins, she too will be lost forever. She would become nothing more than a pawn in this perverse game of souls. No, she whispers to herself, forcing her hands to steady. She doesn't want to be like Jenny, lost to the abyss. Suddenly, a low, guttural laugh rumbles through the chamber. The mirror cracks, splitting Lila's reflection into shards. From within, a shadowy figure emerges, its form contorted and grotesque. It is Madam Blackwood, more monstrous than ever, her once human face now a mask of rotting flesh, her body twisted in unnatural angles. The Academy's dark to something otherworldly. You think you can resist? Madam Blackwood snarls, her voice dripping with malice. You are already marked. Once you set foot in this place, you sealed your fate. Lila backs away, her heart pounding in her chest. She stumbles over her own feet, falling into the cold embrace of the altar where the final rites had once been performed. The room around her shifts, walls closing in, shadows reaching for her. The air is thick with the smell of sulfur, and she can feel the presence of something ancient, powerful, and evil closing in on her. Embrace the darkness, Blackwood's voice echoes, and all your desires will be yours. Lila's mind races. She has one final chance to escape this nightmare, but to do so, she must face the darkest part of herself. The Academy has given her what she always wanted: power, control, pleasure, but at a price. And that price is her soul. In a final desperate act of defiance, Lila uses the knowledge gleaned from the cursed texts, the forbidden incantation that can banish Madam Blackwood's influence. Her voice shakes as she chants the words, the power in her voice growing stronger with each syllable. The room trembles, and the darkness that had once wrapped itself around her like a cloak begins to recoil. Shadows twist and writhe as if they too are alive, resisting her efforts, but the Academy fights back, using her deepest fears against her. Visions of her lost humanity, of the torment of her past, flood her mind. The line between reality and nightmare blurs, and she can hear Jenny's voice once more, sweet and soft, calling her to join her. The temptation is unbearable. For a moment, Lila, then, with a roar, she breaks free from the Academy's grip, her voice rising above the darkness. The air crackles with energy as the shadows scream in fury. Madam Blackwood's form twists and shudders, her face contorted in rage as she begins to fade into the void from which she came. The Academy shakes, its foundations cracking, as the curse is broken, for now, but Lila knows it isn't over. The Academy may have been temporarily defeated, but its influence lingers in the air, and the price she paid for survival may not be as simple as she thinks. The whispers of Satan still call to her, and though she's escaped for now, the darkness will forever haunt her, waiting for the moment she lets her guard down. As Lila exits the Academy's crumbling gates, the storm clears, but the night feels colder than before. The lessons she learned at the Diablo School for girls will stay with her forever, and the shadows of her past will never truly let her go. Lila's pulse quickens as she walks deeper into the shadowed halls of Diablo School for girls. The once grand building is now a labyrinth of decaying walls, its floors groaning under the weight of secrets buried in its foundation. Her mind is clouded with twisted thoughts, the teachings of Satan she's been force-fed for weeks, each ritual more disturbing than the last. She feels as though she's losing herself in the darkness of the Academy. And though she tries to resist, something inside her is stirring, craving the forbidden. The whispered chants of the other girls echo in the halls, a constant reminder of what she is becoming. She knows the price of this place, power, control, pleasure, offered by the very being who lingers in the deepest corners of her mind. Satan's presence hovers like a shadow, urging her closer to the abyss. She can't help but feel drawn to it, a twisted yearning taking root in her heart. Lila, a voice calls from behind, smooth and cold. She turns to see Jenny, her once innocent, now draped in dark robes, her face painted with symbols that glow with an eerie light. The master is waiting. Lila doesn't need to ask who the master is. The headmistress, Madam Blackwood, the diabolical leader of this cursed institution, had promised to make her powerful, promised to unlock the true potential buried deep within her. But the more Lila learns, the more she realizes that power comes at a cost she's unwilling to pay. Yet, the temptation gnaws at her every waking moment. Jenny smiles darkly, her eyes glinting with something far darker than before. Come with me. You'll understand soon enough. This is the only path. Against her better judgment, Lila follows, her legs heavy as if they're being pulled by some unseen force. The room she enters is dimly lit, the air thick with incense and the faint scent of blood. Madam Blackwood stands before a stone altar, her hands raised to the ceiling as she chants in a language that sends chills down Lila's spine. You have come to accept your fate, Lila. Madam Blackwood's voice cuts through the tension, sending a wave of dread over Lila's chest. Here, we cast aside our inhibitions and embrace the true power of the Dark Lord. There is no turning back. Lila can feel the weight of her decision bearing down on her. Her mind is racing. She's seen the torment and pain in the eyes of those who have crossed this threshold before. There's no way to escape once the ritual begins. Jenny steps forward, her gaze unblinking, her voice low and hypnotic. It's the only way. You can feel it, can't you? The power, the pleasure, the freedom that awaits you. All you have to do is surrender. Lila's body trembles, her hands clammy with sweat. She's torn between the fear that claws at her heart and the yearning that twists inside her, urging her to give in. She sees it now, the truth of what's been happening to her since she first arrived at the academy. She's not just learning about Satan, she's become it comes with it is intoxicating. Are you ready, Lila? Madam Blackwood's voice shakes her from her trance. The room falls silent, the air thick with anticipation. She knows what she must do, give herself over completely, embrace the darkness, but as she steps toward the altar, something inside her snaps. The fear, the uncertainty, the knowledge of the horrors this place has forced her to endure, all of it comes crashing down. She's lost, but not completely. She still has a sliver of herself left. No, Lila whispers, barely able to hear her own voice over the pounding of her heart. She turns to flee, but the door slams shut before she can reach it. The walls close in. The room becoming smaller, darker. The air grows heavy with the weight of something ancient and powerful, something that's always been watching her, waiting for her to surrender. Jenny steps closer, her eyes glowing with a predatory gleam. You can't run from this, Lila. There is nowhere to hide. You are already one of us. The ritual has begun, and Lila's body is no longer her own. She can feel the power coursing through her veins, the darkness whispering in her ear, calling her to embrace it. It promises release, promises freedom from her pain, but at what cost? Madam Blackwood raises her hands, and the room erupts in a frenzy of chaos. The walls seem to pulse with life, the shadows dancing as if they have a mind of their own. Lila's skin tingles, her senses heightened as she's drawn into the center of the madness. Her heartbeat quickens, and she can feel herself slipping, losing control. Then it happens, she feels it. The dark presence, the force that has been pulling her into its grasp, takes full hold of her. It's terrifying and exhilarating all at once, a flood of sensations that overwhelm her. Her body reacts in ways she can't explain, her desires and fears merging into a singular, primal need. The darkness feeds on her fear, her hesitation, but it also fuels her strength. She feels alive, like never before, but there's a coldness in her heart. Something's wrong, but it's too late to stop now. Lila screams, a sound of pure anguish and pleasure, as the Academy's true power is finally unlocked. The room shakes, and the walls seem to bleed as if they, too, are alive. She is no longer just a student, she is a vessel, a conduit for something far darker than she could ever have imagined, and as the ritual reaches its peak, she realizes the truth: the Academy was never just a school. It was a trap, a place where souls are broken and remade in the image of Satan himself. And now, Lila is one of them. The darkness claims her, pulling her under into a world where there is no light, no escape, only the endless hunger of the damned. Lila's eyes darted nervously around the dimly lit ritual chamber, the air thick with the heavy scent of incense and decay. The walls seemed to close in around her, as though the very room was alive, breathing in sync with her racing heart. She could feel the presence of something far darker than she had ever imagined. It wasn't just the Academy or the headmistress, it was something ancient, something that had been waiting for her, luring her deeper into its grasp. Madam Blackwood's eyes gleamed with a predatory intensity as she approached. Her footsteps soft but deliberate. You've already taken the first step, Lila. You felt it, haven't you? The power, the freedom that comes with surrendering to the dark. Her voice was hypnotic, drawing Lila in, clouding her mind with promises of release. Lila's throat tightened, the weight of her decision pressing on her chest like a vice. She could still feel the temptation gnawing at her, the whispers of the Dark Lord enticing her to embrace the darkness fully. But she couldn't, she wouldn't. Not like this. Why do you fight it? Madam Blackwood's voice was soothing. Oh, this is your destiny. You are meant for more than this pathetic, mortal existence. Lila tried to take a step back, but her body wouldn't obey. It was as if the room had locked her in place, the air thick with a power she couldn't escape. She felt a sharp, almost electric pulse racing through her veins, a growing hunger that she didn't understand but couldn't deny. The other girls stood in a circle, their eyes empty, their faces blank as if they were all trapped in a trance. Lila wanted to scream, to run, but her voice caught in her throat. The ritual had begun, and it was too late to turn back now. Suddenly, she felt a hand grip her wrist, pulling her towards the altar. It was Jenny. Her once innocent roommate, now unrecognizable in the darkness. Her eyes were cold, devoid of any trace of the girl Lila had once known. "You're not running away from this, Lila," Jenny whispered, her voice low and full of venom. "We all belong to him now. We're all his." The words sent a cold shiver down Lila's spine. This was no longer just about the academy. It was about something far worse, something that reached into the very core of her soul. Lila struggled, trying to break free from Jenny's grip, but her strength was failing her. The darkness was pulling her in, and it felt like her very soul was being consumed by it. She could feel herself slipping away, the temptation to give in growing stronger with every passing second. She could hear the whispers, the promises of power and pleasure, urging her to surrender completely, and then, as the ritual reached its climax, something broke inside her. The darkness surged through her, consuming her will, erasing everything she had ever known. She could feel the cold, the hunger, the twisted pleasure that came with surrendering to Satan's will, but even as she gave herself over to the darkness, she felt something more, something dark and sinister, a presence that was far older, far more malevolent than Satan. It was something else, something lurking in the depths of the academy, watching her every move. Madam Blackwood's voice rang out, echoing through the chamber. "Yes, Lila, you've made the right choice. You are mine now. All of you are mine." But Lila wasn't sure who was in control anymore. The darkness that had consumed her was no longer just a force of evil, it was a living, breathing entity, one that seemed to feed off her fear, her confusion, and her desire. She could feel it twisting inside her, reshaping her into something unrecognizable. As she looked around the room, she saw the other girls, no longer just students, but empty vessels, shells of their former selves. Their eyes blank and lifeless. They were lost, just as she was, trapped in the same web of darkness and desire that had ensnared them all. And then, as the ritual reached its peak, Lila saw something that made her blood run cold, a shadow moving in the corner of the room. It was long and twisted, its form barely visible in the darkness, but its eyes. Its eyes gleamed with an ancient, malevolent intelligence. The shadow watched her, and Lila realized, with a sickening jolt, that it wasn't just a manifestation of Satan's power. It was something else, something far older, far more dangerous. It was the true master of Diablo School for girls, and now, Lila was its pawn. The shadow moved closer, its form becoming clearer with each passing second. It was a figure, but not a human one. It had long, clawed fingers that stretched toward her, its face hidden in the dark folds of its hood. But its eyes, those eyes, pierced through her, seeing into her very soul. "You have given yourself to the darkness, Lila," the figure whispered, its voice deep and resonant, like the very earth itself. "But the price is far greater than you can imagine." Lila felt the walls closing in on her, the suffocating weight of her decision pressing down on her chest. But now she was paying the price. The darkness was not a gift, it was a curse, and there was no escape. As the figure reached out, its fingers brushing her skin, Lila screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness. Lila's scream echoed into the void, only to be swallowed up by the oppressive darkness around her. The shadowy figure loomed closer, its eyes like smoldering embers burning into her soul. The chamber grew colder, as if life itself was draining from the walls, leaving behind an icy void. Madam Blackwood watched from the shadows, her eyes wide with an unholy reverence, as if the horror before her was some sacred ritual. "Welcome, Lila," she whispered, her voice like nails scraping against stone. "You are reborn in darkness now. There's no turning back." Lila struggled, her mind clouded with fear, but something stronger than her terror rooted her to the spot. Whispers filled her mind, confusing her, seducing her with promises of power and freedom from the limits of mortality. She felt herself slipping, the darkness reaching deeper, threatening to drown her last shreds of will, but somewhere, a faint ember of resistance flickered. Memories of her life outside this hellish academy flashed before her eyes, moments of warmth, laughter, things she could barely remember but knew she could not let go. She fought to break free, clawing at the oppressive energy surrounding her. In the distance, a high-pitched scream pierced through the air, jolting her back to reality. The other students, still standing in trance-like obedience, began to stir. The room seemed to writhe with dark energy, shadows twisting into unnatural shapes, and Lila could feel her own fear morphing into something raw, something primal. Madam Blackwood turned her cold gaze on Lila, sensing her resistance. "You still fight," she sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. "But in time, you will learn." Pain is the gestured, and two acolytes stepped forward, their faces blank and eyes vacant, as if they had already surrendered to the darkness. They dragged Lila toward an ancient stone altar carved with sinister symbols. She struggled, but they held her firmly, their strength inhuman. As they forced her down, Madam Blackwood held a twisted dagger above her, its blade gleaming with dark, ancient symbols. "Every soul must be broken before it is reborn," she intoned, raising the blade higher. "Let your suffering be your salvation." The first cut was shallow, slicing across her arm, and a searing pain shot through her. But beneath the pain, something strange happened. Her mind grew sharper. Clearer. Every nerve felt alive, every sense heightened. And with it came a clarity she hadn't felt before, as if the darkness had stripped away every pretense, every illusion she'd built about herself. For a brief moment, she felt something akin to power, a raw, terrifying power. But just as quickly, it turned to dread as she saw the true depths of the school's depravity. The other girls were no longer just students, they were initiates, bound to Madam Blackwood's will. And it wasn't just fear that held them here. They had been transformed, twisted into servants of an ancient evil, willing instruments of cruelty and destruction. But then, amid her horror, a thought crept into her mind, a whisper. Soft and seductive, urging her to embrace the darkness and bend it to her will. If she could survive this initiation, she could turn the tables on them, find a way to wield the very forces they used against her. In that instant, a plan began to form. She would play along, pretend to be broken, to submit to their rituals and their cruelty. And when the time was right, she would strike. Her eyes opened, no longer filled with fear, but with a cold determination. She let herself sink into the darkness, welcoming it, letting it seep into her soul, while keeping that one glimmer of resistance. Madam Blackwood saw the shift and smiled. "Yes," she hissed, pleased. "You're beginning to understand. Surrender fully, and you will be rewarded." But in her heart, Lila vowed that she would not surrender. Not completely. She would learn everything she could about this place, about Madam Blackwood and the ancient evil that controlled them all. And then, when they least expected it, she would make her move. The darkness may have claimed her, but Lila was determined to turn it against itself. Lila lay motionless on the cold, stone altar, her mind racing as she masked her fear with a look of blank obedience. Madam Blackwood continued her ritual, chanting phrases in a language as old as the shadows themselves. Her voice reverberating with a dark power. With each word, the air thickened, heavy with a sense of foreboding, but Lila held on to her plan, her determination hidden like a dagger behind her stoic gaze. She was learning to adapt, to find control in this madness. If she could fool them long enough, she'd discover the secrets they were hiding. The other students watched in a trance, their faces twisted in a strange, haunting serenity. She wondered how many of them were still truly themselves, or if they had surrendered completely, their souls drowned in the shadows of this place. Suddenly, the dim candlelight around the room flickered and died, plunging them all into darkness. The silence pressed in. Thick. Madam Blackwood approached Lila, holding out a tarnished silver amulet carved with ancient symbols. "Wear this," she instructed, fastening it around Lila's neck with a look of triumph. The metal was cold against her skin, sending a jolt of dark energy through her body that nearly made her gasp. She forced herself to stay calm, suppressing the urge to rip it off. "Tonight marks the beginning of your true initiation," Madam Blackwood said, her voice laced with a dangerous thrill. "Only the strong will survive. Those who falter, well, they become part of the school's legacy in a different way." Lila's heart pounded. She sensed the trap she was walking into, but her mind steeled itself. This was her only way to discover the truth. The initiation began with a series of grueling trials. Each one seemed designed to break down the mind, to strip away every defense until only a hollow, willing shell remained. Lila fought to hold on to her resolve, navigating through hallways twisted by illusions, visions of her worst fears leaping at her from the shadows. She could hear the screams of other students echoing through the walls, some real, some hallucinations. She reached the final chamber, where Madam Blackwood and the other acolytes waited, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. A strange symbol had been drawn on the floor in dark crimson, its design so intricate it almost seemed to ripple with energy. The air felt thick, charged, as if something ancient and powerful was watching. "Step inside, Lila," Madam Blackwood commanded, gesturing to the symbol. "This is your final test. Prove your worth, or become one with the darkness." As she stepped forward, Lila's gaze fell on a row of portraits lining the walls. Each depicted a young woman, each face frozen in terror or twisted into a grotesque smile. She realized, with a sickening twist of her stomach, that these were the souls who had failed. They were trapped here, bound to this school for eternity. With a sudden surge of defiance, Lila stepped into the symbol, her head held high. The air around her vibrated, and a strange warmth spread through her chest. She could feel something ancient pressing down on her, a darkness that whispered promises of power and eternal life if only she would submit, but Lila was not like the others. She would use this darkness, bend it to her will. Her mind sharpened, focused, each thought a weapon. As the ritual began, Lila summoned every ounce of strength she had, her mind slipping into a state of razor-sharp clarity. She reached out with her will, pushing against the darkness that sought to invade her thoughts, resisting its pull with a force she hadn't known she possessed. The shadows around her began to shift, their hold weakening. Madam Blackwood's triumphant expression faltered, her eyes narrowing as she sensed the disruption. "What? What are you doing?" Madam Blackwood hissed, her voice laced with fury and fear. Lila's lips twisted into a defiant smile. "I'm not here to serve. I'm here to destroy you." With a fierce surge of will, she pushed against the darkness, reversing the flow of energy. The symbol on the floor began to crack, lines of light searing through the crimson, disrupting the ancient ritual. The room shook, and the other acolytes staggered back, their faces contorted in horror as the ritual began to unravel, the portraits on the walls twisted. Their eyes blazing with a newfound rage as the spirits within them awakened. Freed from their prison, they turned on their captors, their ghastly forms rising from the paintings, their screams of vengeance filling the air. Madam Blackwood stumbled back, her calm facade shattered. She screamed as the spirits swarmed her, dragging her down into the darkness she had worshipped for so long, and in the center of it all, Lila stood, surrounded by chaos, her heart pounding with a fierce sense of victory. She had conquered the darkness, turned it against itself. As the last of the shadows faded, she felt a strange sense of peace, as if the school itself had finally released its grip. The remaining students stood in stunned silence, free from the nightmares that had bound them. With one final glance at the shattered remnants of the symbol on the floor, Lila turned and walked away, leaving the Diablo School for girls, and its dark legacy, behind her forever. As Lila stepped into the midnight air, she felt a strange, icy breath against her skin. For a moment, she thought it was the night breeze, but then she heard a whisper, soft, chilling, and unmistakable, "Leaving so soon?" She spun around to see a dark figure in the doorway of the school. It was Madam Blackwood, but changed. Her once refined features now twisted into something monstrous, her eyes hollow and glowing with a sickly yellow light. She was no longer fully human, and her voice held a raspy resonance, as if layered with countless tormented voices. "Did you think you could escape the darkness, Lila?" Blackwood hissed, stepping forward, her form flickering between the woman she was and a demonic shadow. "The Diablo School's legacy isn't so easily broken." Lila's heart raced, her thoughts churning as she took in the sight before her. She had shattered the ritual, broken the chains that held the spirits bound, but it seemed that the school itself had not relinquished its grip on her. She took a step back, the ground beneath her feet seeming to ripple and writhe as if alive. The landscape around the school distorted, melting into a twisted version of itself. The walls oozed with dark fluid, windows shattered, and shadows grew longer, converging toward her. You've tasted the darkness, Lila. It's inside you now, Blackwood's voice echoed, blending with a chorus of anguished whispers. You can't escape it. You're part of the school now. Lila stumbled, her mind battling against a wave of dread that threatened to consume her. But she couldn't let this be the end. She clenched her fists, a spark of defiance flaring within her. You're wrong, she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gnawed at her. I'm not yours. I'll never be yours. Blackwood's twisted form lurched forward, and with a flick of her hand, she summoned shadows that lashed out like tendrils, each one dripping with a dark, venomous energy. They struck toward Lila, but she ducked, feeling their icy sting as they sliced the air around her. With no way to run, Lila focused inward, reaching for the strength she'd found during the ritual. She conjured every ounce of resistance, fighting to sever the last, dark tendrils that still tried to claim her mind, as she concentrated. Images flashed before her eyes, visions of the students who had fallen before her, their spirits bound to the school, their faces distorted by fear and agony. She felt their anguish, their despair, but also their desire for revenge. They wanted to be free, to see the school and its evil legacy crumble once and for all. Fueled by their pain and her own defiance, Lila channeled a burst of energy, her mind focusing on a single thought: end this. With a surge of determination, she directed her energy outward, breaking the grip of Blackwood's shadows. They shattered like glass, scattering into fragments that dissolved into the night. A piercing scream filled the air as Blackwood's form began to fracture, her face contorting with rage and agony. The spirits Lila had freed rose around her, surrounding Blackwood, their ghostly forms glowing with a fierce, vengeful light. No. Blackwood shrieked, her voice desperate as the spirits descended upon her, tearing her essence apart piece by piece. You can't do this. I am the darkness. But her words faded as the spirits overwhelmed her, their spectral hands clawing and ripping until nothing remained of Blackwood but a faint shadow, which slowly faded into a... As the last remnants of darkness lifted, the school around Lila began to crumble, its walls falling away to reveal the night sky. As Lila staggered out of the ruins of Diablo School, she felt a strange sense of weight lifted, yet something still lingered, like a shadow trailing her. Every step she took felt heavy, as though the ground beneath her wanted to pull her back. She reached her home in the early hours, but as she opened the door, a jarring sense of disorientation overtook her. Her house seemed altered. The hallways were longer, stretched in unnatural angles, and the shadows clung to the corners with an almost physical weight. She shook her head, hoping it was just exhaustion. But the deeper she walked into her home, the more alien it felt. At the end of the hallway, she glimpsed her reflection in the hallway mirror, only it wasn't her. The face staring back wore her features but had a hollow gaze, its eyes gleaming with something dark and knowing. The reflection tilted its head, as if mocking her. Lila recoiled, clutching her chest. Her heart hammered, but when she blinked, the vision was gone. She steadied herself, breathing deeply. She was safe now. Diablo was behind her. Wasn't it? But that night, sleep did not come easily. She was plunged into a restless darkness, where fragments of dreams and nightmares mingled. She was back at the school, wandering the shadowy halls. She felt the presence of something watching her, unseen but oppressive, breathing down her neck. When she turned a corner, she came face to face with Madam Blackwood, only this time. Her face was twisted with rage, her eyes black as pitch. You didn't think you'd escape me, did you, Lila? Blackwood's voice slithered through the darkness, chilling her to the bone. I am bound to you now. Diablo never lets go. Lila screamed herself awake, drenched in cold sweat, her body shaking. She stumbled out of bed, splashing water on her face. But as she glanced in the mirror, she froze. The reflection showed her again, with hollow, mocking eyes, blood dripping from her mouth. No. Lila whispered, gripping real. I'm free. I broke the curse. Her reflection leaned in closer, lips curling into a twisted smile. Did you? Or did you merely bring it home? Over the next days, Lila's reality fractured. Everywhere she went, she felt as if she were being watched. Shadows in her home began to move on their own, slinking along the walls with a life of their own. Objects weren't where she'd left them, the faces in family photos seemed to turn away from her gaze, and faint whispers echoed through the rooms, murmuring secrets she couldn't decipher. Then one night, as she sat in the quiet of her living room, she heard footsteps. They were soft, deliberate, growing louder, closer. She held her breath, gripping the edge of her chair as the footsteps approached. And then, from the shadows, Madam Blackwood emerged, her face twisted in an eternal grin, eyes gleaming with malice. You can't run from what you've invited in, Blackwood sneered. Diablo's darkness has seeped into you, Lila. You're one of us now. Lila backed away, but Blackwood lunged, her fingers stretching into long, clawed talons that raked across Lila's arm, drawing blood. The pain was real, visceral, and with it, the terrifying realization, Diablo's evil had followed her home, embedding itself within her very soul. Desperate, Lila sought answers, delving into the occult to find a way to sever Diablo's hold over her. But each ritual, each chant, seemed to sink her deeper into the darkness. Her mind unraveled, plagued by visions of the school, her nights haunted by ghastly apparitions of students long gone, their twisted faces silently accusing her, drawing her further into Diablo's grasp. It was then she realized, the escape she thought she'd won was just the beginning. Diablo School had not been a mere building, it was a doorway, an entity that existed wherever fear and despair lingered. It had found her vulnerability and seized it, rooting itself into her life. There was no running,